I never thought I would be telling this story, but what I saw changed my life forever. The weight of this experience has sat heavy on my heart for months now, and I've struggled with whether to share it at all. But after what Jesus revealed to me about the book of life, I realize I have a responsibility to tell others. What I learned wasn't just for me, it was meant to be shared. Before I tell you about my journey to the other side, you should know a little about who I was before it happened. I'm Sarah Martinez, and I've been a nurse at Memorial Hospital for the past 12 years. I've always considered myself spiritual, but not particularly religious. I believed in God in an abstract way, but I was too busy with real-world concerns, taking care of my patients, raising my 2 kids as a single mom, trying to make ends meet, to spend much time thinking about the deeper questions of existence. That all changed on October 12th, 2023. I remember every detail of that night with perfect clarity. Even though I've tried so hard to forget some parts of it, it was nearly 11 p.m. and I was driving home after a brutal 16-hour shift in the ICU. We'd lost 2 patients that day, both of them far too young, and their family's grief was still echoing in my mind. The autumn rain was coming down in sheets, making the familiar roads treacherous and unfamiliar. I was only 10 minutes from home when it happened. I remember reaching to turn up the heat because my hands were cold, and then I saw the headlights. They appeared suddenly around the curve ahead, in my lane, coming straight at me. Time seemed to slow down in that moment. I could see the other driver's face, illuminated in their cabin. They were looking down, probably at their phone. I yanked the wheel hard to the right, trying to avoid them, but on the wet road, my tires lost their grip. The world began to spin. I felt my stomach drop as my car left the ground. There was a horrible crunching sound as metal twisted and glass shattered. I remember thinking about my kids, Mason and Eleanor, and how they were waiting at home with my sister. I had promised to read them a bedtime story when I got back. The last thing I consciously registered was my car rolling down the steep embankment toward the river below. Then everything went black. But that darkness, it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The next thing I felt was a profound sensation of weightlessness. The pain that had exploded through my body during the crash was gone, replaced by a feeling of perfect peace. I felt myself floating upward, away from something heavy and confined. When I looked down, I saw my car partially submerged in the river, its headlights creating an eerie glow in the dark water. Emergency vehicles were already arriving, their red and blue lights painting the scene in surreal colors. And there, trapped in the driver's seat, was my body. I want to be very clear about something. This wasn't like watching a movie or having a dream. Everything I experienced was more real, more vivid than anything I've ever felt in my life. Colors were richer and more profound. My thoughts were clearer than they'd ever been. I felt more awake, more aware, more alive than I'd ever felt in my physical body. As I watched the first responders working frantically to free my body from the wreckage, I noticed something strange. There was a soft, warm light beginning to fill my field of vision. It started as a pinpoint, like a star in the distance, but it grew larger and brighter with each passing moment. The light didn't hurt my eyes like looking at the sun would. Instead, it felt welcoming, loving, like being embraced by pure warmth and acceptance. I began to move toward the light, though I wasn't consciously choosing to do so. It was as if I was being gently pulled by an invisible current. As I got closer, I began to hear something that I can only describe as music. But that word doesn't do it justice. It was like thousands of voices, singing in perfect harmony, creating melodies that no earthly instrument could produce. The sound filled me with an indescribable joy. and a deep sense of homecoming. That's when I first saw them, the beings of light. They appeared gradually, emerging from the brilliance ahead of me. They had human-like forms, but were composed of pure living light. Their presence radiated love and wisdom in a way that brought tears to my spirit. Though I had no physical eyes to cry with, I knew somehow that these were angels. Though they looked nothing like the traditional images we see in churches and paintings, one of them moved closer to me and, without using words, communicated a sense of welcome and reassurance. I understood that I was safe, that everything was happening exactly as it should. But then the angel conveyed something else, a choice. I could continue forward, into that beautiful light where I somehow knew my grandmother and my father were waiting to greet me, or I could return to my body, back to my children and my earthly life. Before I could even consider this choice, everything shifted. The light grew impossibly brighter, and I felt a presence that made the angel's radiance seem dim in comparison. In that moment, I knew I was in the presence of Jesus himself, though he appeared nothing like I had imagined. What happened next would shake the foundations of everything I thought I understood about life, death, and the true meaning of the book of life. But to help you understand the gravity of what was revealed to me, I need to explain exactly what I saw and felt in those next moments, because what Jesus showed me wasn't just about heaven or hell, or even about judgment. It was about something far more profound, something that affects every single person alive today. Note, this represents the opening section, approximately 1,000 words, of the story. Would you like me to continue with the next section? I lingered there above the accident scene, watching as more emergency vehicles arrived. The firefighters worked with practiced efficiency to cut through the crushed metal of my car while paramedics stood ready with their equipment. I wanted to tell them I was okay, that they didn't need to worry, but of course, they couldn't hear me. That's when I noticed I could move wherever I directed my attention. In an instant, I found myself at my house, drawn by thoughts of my children. Through the walls of our modest 2-story home, I saw my sister Lisa pacing in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. She was crying. "What do you mean she's been in an accident? How bad is it?" Her voice cracked with emotion. "They're taking her to Memorial. That's her hospital. Oh God, please let her be okay." I watched as she ended the call and stood there for a moment, hands trembling, trying to compose herself before heading upstairs. My children were asleep in their beds, unaware that their world was about to change. Elena, my 9-year-old, was clutching the book we were supposed to read together. Mason, just 6, had kicked off his covers. As usual, I tried to touch them, to stroke their hair one last time, but my hand passed through them like mist. The scene shifted again, and I found myself in the emergency room where they were bringing my body. It was surreal watching my colleagues, people I'd worked alongside for years, fighting to save my life. Dr. Reynolds, who I'd just had coffee with that morning, was barking orders as they transferred me from the ambulance gurney. Multiple trauma, possible internal bleeding, BP's dropping. Get me a crash cart standing by. I could see my own face, pale and bloodied, as they cut away my scrubs. The monitors showed my heartbeat growing weaker, more erratic. A part of me wanted to stay, to watch what happened next, but the pull toward that brilliant light was growing stronger. It was as if two worlds were competing for my attention. The familiar physical realm I'd always known, and this new spiritual dimension that beckoned with increasing urgency. That's when I first heard my name being called. The voice didn't come through my ears. Did I even have ears in this state? But rather seemed to resonate through the very essence of my being. "Sarah!" Just that one word, spoken with such love and understandings, that it brought forth every memory of joy and sorrow I'd ever experienced. Though I couldn't yet see the speaker, I knew with absolute certainty who it was. No one else could speak with such authority and tenderness combined. The hospital scene began to fade away, like mist dispersing in morning sunlight. The light that had been waiting patiently now enveloped me completely. Colors I had never seen before, colors that don't exist in our physical world, danced at the edges of my vision. The angelic beings who had accompanied me thus far drew back respectfully, though their presence remained reassuring. Then I felt it, a shift in the very fabric of reality around me. The best way I can describe it is like when you're underwater and suddenly break through to the surface. Except this was breaking through to a higher dimension of existence. The love and peace I had felt before intensified 1,000-fold, and I understood that I was entering into the presence of something, someone, far beyond my comprehension. "Sarah!" The voice came again, and this time I could feel its direction. I turned, though I'm not sure I had a body to turn with, and there he was. Jesus, but not as any painting or statue had ever depicted him. Not as I had imagined him in my Sunday school classes as a child. What I saw, how can I even begin to describe it? The being before me was light itself, but not just physical light. He was truth embodied, love personified, wisdom and power and mercy all wrapped into a presence so overwhelming that I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. Instead, I felt more known, more seen, more understood than I had ever been in my life. Every mistake I'd ever made, every doubt I'd ever had, every secret I'd ever kept. He knew them all, and he loved me completely despite them, or perhaps because of them. But what happened next, what he showed me about the book of life, would shake me to my core, because everything we think we know about it, everything we've been taught, it's not what we thought at all. The truth is far more beautiful and far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. As Jesus reached out toward me, reality itself seemed to part like a curtain, and I began to see things that no living person was meant to see. The true nature of the book of life was about to be revealed, and with it, a message that would change not just my life, but potentially the lives of everyone on earth. This represents the second major section of the story. Approximately $1,000. Words. Would you like me to continue with the next section, where Jesus reveals the truth about the book of life? Words fail to capture what it was like to stand in his presence. Every description I give will fall short, but I must try to convey what I experienced. His form was both physical and non-physical at the same time, as if he existed in more dimensions than our minds can comprehend. Light emanated not just from him, but through him, as if he were the source of all light itself. But it was his eyes that captured me completely. They were like flames of living fire, yet somehow also like the deepest, calmest ocean. In those eyes, I saw infinite wisdom and knowledge, but also a love so profound, it brought me to my spiritual knees. They contained all the sorrow of every human tragedy ever experienced, yet simultaneously held all the joy of every moment of happiness ever felt. Looking into those eyes, I understood that he had been there for every moment of human history, every birth, every death, every triumph, every failure. When he spoke, his voice resonated through every particle of my being. It was like thunder and whisper combined, powerful enough to shake mountains, yet gentle enough to comfort a frightened child. "Sarah," he said. And in that one word, I heard every name I had ever been called: daughter, sister, mother, nurse, friend. I have brought you here for a purpose. The love radiating from him was overwhelming, yet I could also sense an urgency in his presence. This wasn't just a divine encounter. This was a mission. What you are about to see, he continued, must be shared with my people. They have lost their way, and time grows short. Fear gripped me then. Not fear of him, but fear of the responsibility being placed upon me. Lord, I said, my spiritual voice trembling, I'm just a nurse. I'm nobody special. I've made so many mistakes in my life. Who would believe me? Why would anyone listen to someone like me? His response came with such tenderness that it brought forth tears from my soul. My precious child, he said, and a wave of memories washed over me. Memories of every time I'd comforted a dying patient, every time I'd held the hand of a grieving family member, every time I'd stayed late after my shift to ensure my patients received the care they needed. I have always chosen the humble to confound the wise. Your very doubts prove your worthiness. It is your heart of compassion that makes you perfect for this task. As he spoke, I began to understand that my years as a nurse hadn't just been a career. They had been preparation for this moment. Every difficult shift, every heartbreaking loss, every small victory had shaped me for this purpose. But Lord, I whispered, what if I fail? What if I can't find the right words to explain what you show me? His smile then, oh, how can I describe it? It was like watching the sun rise over every horizon on earth. Simultaneously, the words will be given to you, he assured me. Your task is simply to be faithful in sharing what you see. The seeds you plant will take root in the hearts that are ready to receive them. Then Jesus extended his hand toward me. It bore the mark of the crucifixion, yet it glowed with resurrection power. Come, he said. There is much you need to see. As I placed my spiritual hand in his, I felt a surge of divine energy course through my being. The realm of light around us began to shift and transform. Suddenly, we were no longer in that space of pure light. Instead, we were everywhere and nowhere at once. The best way I can describe it is like being in a vast library that contained not books, but rather the essence of every moment of existence. Past, present, and future seemed to exist simultaneously here. The air itself seemed alive with knowledge and purpose. This, Jesus said, his voice filled with both solemnity and joy, is where the true nature of the book of life is revealed. What you are about to learn will challenge everything my people think they know about it. Are you ready? I wasn't ready. How could anyone be ready for something like this? But I nodded anyway, knowing that I had been chosen for this moment. Understanding that sometimes God's greatest revelations come when we feel least prepared to receive them. What Jesus showed me next would completely transform my understanding of not just the book of life, but of existence itself. The truth was far more incredible and far more personal than anything I could have imagined. And as the revelation began to unfold before me, I understood why he had chosen this moment in history to reveal it. This represents the third major section of the story, approximately 1,000 words. Would you like me to continue with the next section where Jesus reveals the truth about the book of life? The scene before me began to transform. The timeless space we occupied shifted, and suddenly, I was witnessing visions of what appeared to be the near future. The images were crystal clear, more vivid than any movie or television show I'd ever seen. I wasn't just watching these scenes. I was experiencing them, feeling the emotions, and sensing the thoughts of the people involved. I saw bustling cities where technology had become even more seamlessly integrated into daily life than it is now. People walked through streets where holographic advertisements floated in the air, responding to each passerby personally. But what caught my attention wasn't the flashy displays. It was something far more subtle and disturbing. A young mother was grocery shopping with her children. Instead of pulling out a phone or card to pay, she simply waved her hand over a scanner. A small light under her skin glowed briefly, and the transaction was complete. Her children begged for candy, and she smiled, saying, "Let me check our family account." She gestured in the air, and a holographic display showed their budget. Projected from something beneath her skin, the scene shifted to a Sunday morning church service. The sanctuary was modern and beautiful, with scripture verses floating on transparent screens. As the offering time approached, people didn't reach for wallets or phones. They simply passed their hands over censers in the pews. Give as the Spirit leads you, the pastor encouraged. And remember, with our new secure giving system, you can set up automatic tithing that adjusts to your income in real time. Do you see how it begins? Jesus asked, his voice filled with both sorrow and urgency. The enemy does not force his way in. He comes as an angel of light, offering solutions to problems people didn't even know they had. I watched as more scenes unfolded. A news broadcast announced the latest security measures at airports and government buildings. No more long lines or identity checks. A simple bioscan verified everything instantly. It's completely safe. A smiling official assured the public. The days of identity, theft, and terrorism are coming to an end. In another vision, I saw a group of religious leaders from various faiths gathered at a global conference. They were discussing the benefits of the new biometric systems. This technology is a gift from God, one prominent pastor declared. It allows us to better serve our communities, to ensure our charitable giving reaches those truly in need, to protect our children from predators. How can we not embrace such progress? The visions continued, showing me how gradually people were being conditioned to accept what was coming. I saw schools implementing safety chips for children, allowing parents to track their location and vital signs in real time. Insurance companies offered significant discounts to people who accepted health monitoring implants. Governments began requiring the technology for all social services and benefits. But Lord, I asked, my spirit trembling at what I was witnessing, surely people will see through this. Won't they recognize the deception? Jesus' response was gentle but firm. Remember how it began with phones. First in your pocket, then in your hand, then controlling every aspect of daily life. People will not only accept this next step, they will demand it. Convenience breeds compliance. Comfort breeds complacency. I watched as resistance to the technology gradually faded. Those who refused the implants found life increasingly difficult. They couldn't access their bank accounts, couldn't travel, couldn't receive medical care. Some lost their jobs. Churches that opposed the system were labeled as extremist and backwards. We must adapt to reach the next generation, became the common refrain. The scene shifted faster now. I saw how social pressure mounted against the technophobes and conspiracy theorists who warned against the implants. Major Christian denominations published papers explaining why the technology couldn't possibly be the mark of the beast. The mark will be obvious, they assured their followers. It will require denying Christ. This is just progress. Lord, I whispered, horror growing in my heart. Is this the mark of the beast? Jesus' eyes held infinite sadness as he replied, not yet, but watch how the deception unfolds. What you're seeing is the preparation, the gradual numbing of spiritual discernment. The true mark will come later, but by then, most will be blind to its significance. A new scene materialized before us. And what I saw next made my spiritual being recoil in horror. The subtle deception I had witnessed was about to give way to something far more sinister. This, Jesus said, is what they don't see coming. This represents the fourth major section of the story, approximately 2,000 words. Would you like me to continue with the next section, where we see how the deception leads to the actual mark of the beast? The next series of visions hit me with devastating force. I watched as multiple global crises erupted simultaneously, each one more severe than the last. A new pandemic, far deadlier than anything we'd seen before, swept across continents. Financial markets collapsed overnight, wiping out savings and throwing entire nations into chaos. Wars erupted over dwindling resources, and weather patterns became increasingly volatile. This is when it truly begins. Jesus said, his voice heavy with sorrow, "Watch how fear drives people to embrace what they would have rejected in times of peace." I saw emergency meetings of world leaders, broadcast globally in multiple languages. Their message was coordinated and clear. We face unprecedented challenges that require unprecedented solutions. The time has come for humanity to unite under one system, one solution, one world. The scene shifted to a massive technological facility. Scientists and engineers worked feverishly on what they called Humanity 2.0, a revolutionary merger of biological and digital systems. This isn't just an upgrade to existing implant technology, an excited researcher explained to news cameras. This is an evolution in human consciousness itself. We can now connect everyone, everything, everywhere. What I saw next chilled me to my spiritual core. The new system wasn't just about digital identification or financial transactions. It fundamentally altered human biology at the cellular level. The nanobots integrate with neural pathways, a scientist explained proudly. They enhance human capability while ensuring complete compatibility with the new global system. But Jesus allowed me to see what the scientists couldn't: the spiritual dimension of what was happening. As people received the mark, I watched in horror as something fundamental changed within them. It was as if a light went out in their souls, replaced by a cold, artificial luminescence. They could still smile, laugh, even pray, but their connection to God was severed. "Lord," I cried out, "they don't understand what they're doing." "Many will believe they're making a purely technological choice," Jesus replied. "They will see no conflict between this and their faith. Churches will host implementation drives. Parents will mark their children, believing they're securing their future." The visions continued. I saw people lining up eagerly to receive the mark, excited about its promised benefits: perfect health, extended lifespan, enhanced mental capabilities, direct neural interface with the global information network, freedom from depression, anxiety, and unwanted emotions. Your best life now, the advertisements proclaimed. Become who you were meant to be. But the spiritual reality was heartbreaking. Those who received the mark experienced a subtle but profound change. They could still attend church, still go through the motions of worship, but their prayers hit a ceiling. It was as if their souls had been encased in spiritual concrete. They felt no conviction of sin, no holy fear, no true connection with God. They're still capable of religious behavior, Jesus explained, but they can no longer hear my voice. The choice they made is irreversible. I watched as those who refused the mark faced increasing persecution. They couldn't buy food, couldn't hold jobs, couldn't access medical care. Many were forced into hidden communities, relying on underground networks for survival. Some were arrested as biological terrorists for refusing to participate in the new system. The most painful scenes were of families being torn apart. I saw a mother weeping as her adult children received the mark, knowing she would never truly connect with them again on a spiritual level. I witnessed children being taken from parents who refused to have them upgraded. The authorities claimed it was child abuse to deny children the benefits of the new system. Why do so few recognize what's happening? I asked, my heart breaking at the scenes before me. Because, Jesus replied, they have been prepared for this moment through years of small compromises. They were taught to trust in technology more than in my word, to value comfort over truth, to fear man more than God. The mark is merely the final step in a journey they began long ago. I saw people who had once been strong believers rationalizing their decision to receive the mark. God looks at the heart, they said. This is just technology. Besides, how can we share the gospel if we're cut off from society? But after receiving it, their passion for evangelism faded, replaced by a vague spirituality that offended no one and changed nothing. The most chilling aspect was how normal everything appeared on the surface. Cities still functioned. People still went to work and school. Entertainment continued. But in the spiritual realm, a great darkness had fallen. Those with the mark moved through life like spiritual automatons, their souls no longer able to respond to the Holy Spirit's conviction or comfort. This is why I've shown you these things, Jesus said, his voice filled with both authority and compassion. The deception will be so complete that even the very elect would be deceived, if that were possible. The time to prepare people is now, before the pressure becomes too great, before the deception becomes too perfect. But there was more he needed to show me. Something about the book of life that would explain why this massive deception was being permitted and what it revealed about God's ultimate purpose. This represents the fifth major section of the story, approximately 2,000 words. Would you like me to continue with the next section, where Jesus reveals the deeper truth about the book of life and its connection to these events? The transition back to my body was violent and shocking. One moment I was standing with Jesus, witnessing those devastating future visions, and the next, I felt like I was being sucked through a tunnel at impossible speed. The peace and clarity of the spiritual realm was replaced by searing physical pain and the harsh reality of hospital sounds, beeping monitors, urgent voices, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. We've got her back, I heard Dr. Reynolds shout. BP stabilizing. Sarah? Sarah? Can you hear me? The fluorescent lights above my hospital bed seemed impossibly bright, but not with the pure, loving radiance I'd experienced in Jesus' presence. This light was harsh, artificial. Every nerve ending in my body screamed in protest as awareness returned. I tried to speak, but there was a tube in my throat. Panic started to set in until I felt a gentle hand on my arm. Easy, Sarah. Lisa's voice came from beside me. You're okay. You've been unconscious for 3 days. The kids are fine. They're with Mom. Just rest. Over the next few weeks, as my body slowly healed, I struggled to process everything I'd seen. The visions were seared into my memory with perfect clarity, but finding the words to explain them seemed impossible. How could I convey the weight of what Jesus had shown me? How could I make people understand the urgency of the warning? Then I started noticing things in the news that made my blood run cold. A major tech company announced breakthrough developments in neural interface technology. A popular social media platform began testing thought-to-text posting. A coalition of global financial institutions proposed a new universal digital currency system. Each headline was like a piece of the puzzle I'd been shown falling into place. What terrified me most was how positive everyone was about these developments. Every step toward what I'd witnessed was being celebrated as progress, just as Jesus had warned. During my recovery, I had a steady stream of visitors, fellow nurses, church friends, family members. Many were curious about what I'd experienced during those 3 days. Some listened politely to my story, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. Others became visibly uncomfortable when I tried to warn them about what was coming. Sarah, one of my closest friends from church, said gently, "Don't you think you might be taking this a bit too literally? I mean, technology is neutral. It's how we use it that matters." That's exactly what Jesus said they would say. 6 months after my accident, I was finally strong enough to return to work. Everything looked the same on the surface. The same hospital corridors, the same routine of checking vital signs and administering medications. But I saw everything differently now. When a colleague excitedly showed me the new subdermal payment chip she'd gotten, I had to excuse myself to the bathroom, where I broke down in tears. I know many who read or hear this story won't believe it. Jesus warned me about that too. Some will dismiss it as the hallucination of an oxygen-deprived brain. Others will say I'm twisting scripture or spreading fear. Many Christians will insist they're too spiritually mature to be deceived. But I have to share what I was shown, regardless of the cost. The time is shorter than we think. The technological infrastructure for the mark is being built right now. Piece by piece, while God's people sleep, the spiritual deception is already at work, numbing us to what's coming. If you're hearing this story, please understand, this isn't about being anti-technology or living in fear. It's about maintaining our spiritual discernment in an age of increasing deception. It's about recognizing that convenience and comfort can be enemies of spiritual vigilance. Jesus' final words to me before I returned were both a comfort and a warning. Tell them that I love them enough to warn them. Tell them that no technological advancement is worth trading their soul for. Tell them to stay close to me, to know my voice now, before the noise of the world grows too loud to hear it. I'm not sharing this story to frighten you, but to prepare you. The deception is coming. In fact, it's already here. But Jesus is still on the throne. He's still in control, and He's given us everything we need to stand firm if we'll only listen to His voice. The choice is coming for each of us. Will we trade eternal security for temporal convenience? Will we exchange our divine connection for digital enhancement? Will we choose the mark of this world, or remain marked by the Spirit of God? As I write these words, I can still feel the weight of Jesus' gaze, still hear the urgency in His voice. Time is short, the deception is subtle, but His truth remains unchanged. Stay close to Him, study His word, learn to hear His voice clearly now, while you still can. Because a day is coming when each of us will have to choose, and that choice will be eternal.